Hello and good afternoon, everyone. This is Sherry Sims, founder of Black Career Women's Network, for our Career Tip Tuesday. And want to go ahead and jump right into what we want to talk about today, specifically talk about when companies actually are not accountable for their mistakes. Okay, when companies are not accountable for their mistakes. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because I had an experience, not me, but one of my clients had an experience about a mistake that was made or something that was overlooked and how that trickled down. So I don't want to talk about the whole story because I want to protect their privacy, but I really want to talk about when companies make mistakes and when there is a lack of accountability. What does that say, right? So let's kind of go dive into a couple of things. And you all know the drill. When you are on here, please let us know where you are tuning in from. We want to know what your where you're watching from, and just hey, shout out and say hello to us. All right. So here's the first thing: when companies do not take accountability for a mistake, what does that really mean? You know, and I had this asked this question to a group that I was working with last week, and the first thing that came to their mind when I talked about when companies make mistakes, the first thing they said was ego. That was the first thing that came to mind with the group that I was talking to when it came to organizations making mistakes. They were like, ego, nobody wants to take accountability for it. And the thing about it is if you are not paying attention to the people that you work with or how these things happen, yeah, it can be ego, whether it's an individual or a group. So I think thinking about ego is important because what you don't want to do is look at it and think that it's, obviously a organizational overall problem and it could have just been one individual, but how an organization handles their mistakes is important. Tip number two is to watch for who makes the mistakes and what happens. Okay, watch for who makes the mistakes, right, and what happens, because that can make a big difference too for you to think about. Is there special treatment, and and how can they get by? So maybe you make a mistake and people are screaming about it, but maybe the person who makes a mistake, who has a little bit more likability, maybe they can get away with that, right? So watch for who makes the mistakes and what happens, and what chain of command is that coming from as well. Another tip I want to share, we're still on tip two, but I want to add something to this specific tip here in terms of watching for who makes mistakes and what happens. Okay. When you think about two different things, when you think about when companies make mistakes and looking at how they deal with mistakes, look at if it's either proactive or reactive, right? How you know it's proactive is because you have leaders and individuals. I went into tip number three, didn't I already? That's okay. Look at individuals and think about, um, you know, do you have people who make decisions because they want to be able to get ahead of the what ifs and things that could happen? Or is it more of things happen, they blow up, and then the organizations want to course correct? We do understand that there are times where there are unforeseen things that happen in the workplace, that can cause for leaders to have to be um, reactive, right? Which means they have to now come up with a should I say a solution to the problem, right? And if they're not coming up with a solution to the problem, that's another issue as well. Hi, hey Cynthia, welcome to Career Tip Tuesday, and hello LinkedIn user. Oh, hi Chantel, and you're watching from Illinois. I love this. And hi Cynthia, watching from Facebook. So again, watch who makes mistakes and what happens. Because if just because you see even a peer of yours, if a peer makes a mistake and they are able to, get away with that with a slap on the wrist, or minimal reprimand for what has happened, you have to pay attention to that. Or again, if there's someone who gets, it's no low tolerance and they, put on a final warning or even get terminated, You have to pay attention to the variations of who's making the mistakes and what happens, and paying attention to if there's differential treatment or if it's equal across the board. So it's important for you to recognize that. Now I'm going to go back to tip number three, which is that the company is, are they proactive or are they reactive? Okay. And what I mean by proactive and reactive is if you have an organization where there is a big mistake that is made, again, are they scrambling to try to come up with a problem solution? Or are they proactive to make sure that there are things in place and thinking about the what ifs? And a lot of times, if you are working for a company as proactive, that means it's probably a healthy way that things are done. And a lot of times, if you're working for a company that is consistently reactive, more than a lot of times, that is a company that is operating out of dysfunction. And here's the thing: as Black women, we cannot afford to be working under toxic leaders or dysfunctional workplaces. Okay, that is exhausting. So if you are working for an organization that is reactive to where they're only coming up with problem solutions after things blow up and you see that happening consistently, that is a red flag. Specifically, if you are a new hire and you start to see this happen, whether it is a mistake that was made by you or anyone else, and you see it reactive in the way they respond, you have to pay attention to that because that means that's something they're probably going to respond to through your entire you know time there. So think about that for sure. And two, when it comes to being proactive, you might be an individual that is proactive, and I think that goes to number three. I mean number four is is proactiveness received well, right? Is proactiveness received well? And I mean that is, that may not sound like a word, but is it received well? And what I mean by is it received well is, are you able to come up with offers and solutions to things because you are someone who is a future thinking individual and you want to get ahead of certain things? So you want to offer up solutions that can help to minimize the fallout when it happens, right? And if proactiveness is received well, that means you're probably working in an environment where they're open to new ideas and people and things instead of, well, this is how we always did it, so we're not going to do it that way. Cynthia, I love what you said here in your comment. So if you find that you have yourself in a toxic environment, when it did not initially present itself that way, what would be the timeline you would say to get out of it? Oh, Cynthia, that is such a good question. I have been there and done that, right? Here's the thing with the toxic environment, and again, this is why when you paying attention to how a company responds to mistakes or how they take care of mistakes and give you a big flag on what type of leadership that you have that's in place at that organization. So if you find yourself in this space, Cynthia, you have to kind of do an inventory of some things. Are the decisions being made or the toxicity, is it coming from the top down or is it at your level, right? Because again, companies have a culture and then there's a subculture within the company because you have different departments that communicate and engage in each other. So is the toxicity within your department or is it something you see coming from the leadership down in terms of their behavior, how they respond to things? So there's a combination of things to look at for that. And even if an organization did not present itself that way in the beginning, there's something called organizational shifts and drifts. And what that means is that as leadership people leave and new ones come in, they may not adapt to the culture, then they may come in and try to make their own mark, and things change, and no one's holding them accountable for the culture that's been established and allowing them to do what they want. So everyone has their own individual threshold, Cynthia. So what you have to do is take an inventory of what yours is. Yours, it should be comprised of looking at, how is your individual work being impacted by this toxic environment? What does your well-being look like? Is your well-being being impacted by this? Are you where you were able to receive support for what you do? Is there a lack of that? What you have to really take an inventory of what really is impacting you and keeping you from being able to do the work that you do, and do it at an excellent level of standard that is what you want for your work. So you have to specifically think about that and what that timeline looks like for you. What means that, are you ready to put an exit strategy together, and what does that exit strategy look like, and how long do you want that to be? 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? What does that look like? And Cynthia brings up a great point. For those of you who are watching, you may have worked in a work environment that started out great, but now it has turned toxic. It didn't happen overnight. That happens subtly, and if you're not paying attention, before you know it, the whole organization is just like hell on wheels. So you do have to pay attention to that goes back to the organizational shifts and drifts. Pay attention to the behaviors. Who is being supported and who's not. There's a lot of things that goes along with thinking about that. And then Cynthia, you might want to also kind of kind of reference toxic, because some people think toxic is one thing and it could be another. So what does that look like for you? What does a toxic environment look like to you? Because again, for me, you might be able to work in a toxic workplace, but it may not necessarily be impacting you and what you do. It doesn't mean it won't it's not headed your way, but for the time being, it may not be impacting you. So again, to think about what that looks like, and if you got a little bit more detail to share, please reach out. Or if you would love to share on here, that's fine as well. So I hope that answered a little bit of your question with your comment. And hello, Valerie from Austin. Is it hot there? I love Austin. Austin's great. All right. So thinking about again, going back to is proactiveness, right? Is being proactive received well? Again, is being proactive received well in your organization? Because some people, you can have a certain type of work ethic. You can be someone who is driven by your principles and how you engage and communicate and work with people in your workplace. And there's other people who may not have those same principles. So, even though you are walking your walk in the way that you should be, as always, right? In terms of showing up and being the individual that you are, whether it's working in excellence, maybe you stand by being a great communicator, maybe you're someone who delivers everything in before the deadline. Either way, you want to make sure that it doesn't matter whether people like it or not, but you want to pay attention to if being proactive is received well. Again, that is a sign if you're working in an environment that is open to new ideas and things way to do things, and that they're more than likely open to making sure that we're staying ahead of anything the fallouts versus going behind and scrambling trying to resolve them. Personally, for me, if I'm working in a proactive environment, to me that feels more healthy because we're really thinking about what the fallout could be and making sure that we are being proactive for it. So it's all about what you think and what's your mindset when it comes to um, thinking about being proactive and reactive in the workplace. Hi, Beverly. Beverly says being let go from leadership because they cannot handle the voice of a strong black woman. Beverly, I love what you just said, right? And when I think about this, a lot of times if they can't handle, yeah, absolutely, girl, that is so toxic, okay? Very toxic, right? And here's the thing, if you're working in an environment where they cannot handle the voice of a strong black woman, that means that you're probably more than likely they're working mediocre at a mediocre level and they're getting by on that. Where you are someone who has standards and you're working at a level of excellence, or maybe you're working at a level that where you are maximizing what you need to in that role, and because your performance is making theirs look mediocre, okay, especially if they're a peer. And we have to think about these things. But at the end of the day, as much as that is, we have to understand how to manage these things, how to speak up and be advocates for ourselves. Beverly says we want to learn and be challenged, but they are completely aware of their own biases. Absolutely, and because they are aware of them, are we helping them? Are we letting them know that we acknowledge they have them as well? So are we calling them out on the bias? Right. There is a leadership program where I facilitate and coach the women in here in my local area. And there's a T-shirt they made for me. I think I'm gonna probably wear it to the next Career Tip Tuesday. And we talk about how we address microaggressions or address issues around identifying if there's individual bias, challenges with individuals and the in our relationships. And so I always I give them this question to ask to really kick off the conversation, which is, can we talk about this with mutual respect and understanding? And if you come and talk about that, if you address it from that way, where you are, can we talk about this with mutual respect and understanding? If they want to show out after I ask that question, then that shows you your character. A person with a high level of emotional intelligence, if I ask you, hey, can we talk about this with mutual respect and understanding? They should be able to, if they have the right level of emotional intelligence, say, absolutely, even if it makes them uncomfortable, right? Beverly says, too old, can't take it anymore. Yes, I meant aren't aware, HR especially. Whew. Now, Beverly, when you say HR especially, you have taken this conversation to another place. And I'm saying that in a good way, because a lot of times we don't think that HR is impacted by a lot of these behaviors, but they are. I just had this conversation with a colleague around how we don't talk enough about how HR individuals treat each other. Yes, I said it because it is the truth. No one wants to really talk about that specifically, but the same things that you see that they pull or they support and support and do and other, for the toxic stuff, okay, that toxic behaviors and things like that, they do the same thing to their own colleagues. No, Patricia, not all of us. I didn't say all of us, okay. What I was saying is that you do have individuals in the profession who do not practice what they preach. So, and I'm an HR professional too. So I'm saying this because I've seen it and it's the truth. So no, not all of us are like that, but you do have some individuals who do not do right by their own colleagues. So, and that's the truth. Beverly says, yes, get all mad and stuff about what's that all about? Here's the thing. We have to understand that as Black women, we have to pay attention to the behaviors of other people in the workplace. And when we are HR professionals, that's part of what we are trained to do, is to understand behavior, right? Patricia, you should be able to back me on this one. And so, you have to. And I've been in the industry for a very long time. I'm showing my age now. But again, we have to understand how to do that. Patricia, do they teach you in certification about bias, like the true stuff? That's true. And so I don't know if they do or not. It's been a long time since I got my PhD mines. I got mine way back before it was even hot to get. So again, that's true. And the bias stuff is what you have to pay attention to. If you understand what biases are and how they show up, there's something like 150 different type of biases. There are so many. But if you can identify a bias and be able to pay attention to the behavior and know that's what it is, then it is your responsibility, specifically if you're being impacted by that bias, to call it out, right? Because this is your job you're protecting. This is your career that you're protecting. And again, I think it's important to recognize and understand what biases are. You don't have to be an HR professional to recognize and understand what biases are. If you know what they are as an individual professional, all that does is be able to empower and educate you on when you recognize these things, and then take certain specific steps to learn how to call it out, to advocate for yourself, or even if you witness it. Okay, I always say that even as someone who witnesses a bias, that you can also speak up as well. Patricia says, yes, I facilitate these types of sessions. That is awesome, Patricia. I love that you facilitate those types of sessions, because it's important that we as professionals understand what bias is. So when we recognize that we are experiencing that, then we need to either, especially if it's a one-time incident and you want to be able to call it out in real time, being able to have the tools to do that. Or if you see that there's a pattern of behavior with someone specifically towards you, being able to document that pattern of behavior. And when you get ready to discuss it, you've got the examples of, here's some examples of what I've experienced from you. So again, don't know how we got down this rabbit hole, but I'm okay with that. Beverly says, I refer to laughing in the boardroom by the HR director as chocolate chip, something that her mother affectionately called me. You were referred to laughing. So were you called chocolate chip in the boardroom, Beverly? Because that's not acceptable if you were. So I guess give a little bit more context. And Patricia says, yes, I agree. We do need to advocate for ourselves and our peers. Absolutely, Patricia. We absolutely should do that. And again, I cannot stress enough how understanding various types of biases in the workplace, and you having the tools and the resources to address the biases, okay? And someone else's level of uncomfortableness is not your problem. This is not. It's not your problem, right? What you can do is say, I know this conversation may make you feel uncomfortable, or not make you feel uncomfortable. What you say is, I know this conversation may feel uncomfortable to you. However, and then you go into explain or give details of what you experienced, or if you witness it, give examples or examples, but give details of what you experienced. It's all empowerment. How they respond to it shows their level of emotional intelligence, right? And then also remember too, who are you speaking with? Are you talking to a peer? Are you talking to someone who is a higher level of leadership? Because again, someone in leadership is not above reproach. I'm just saying. They're not. Now, you may have to be strategic in about how you address it and have the conversation with that higher level of leader, but they're not still not above reproach. Okay, they're just not. Especially if you know that they have either the behavior was directly towards you, or if you witnessed it from someone else. So again, I think it's important to understand they're not above reproach, but you do need to be strategic in how you want to address that with that higher level leader. And then two, there shouldn't be any consequences from that. And what I mean by that is you should not, now you need to be making sure you're not looking at behavior of retaliation from an individual because you have decided to empower yourself and approach them about what you experience with them specifically. Beverly says, yes, in the boardroom, last company was a real experience with a woman named Karen that was allowed to curse me out and nothing done after sharing it. Asked what I wanted them to do, but no longer have that job. Wow. No one should have to go to work and get cussed out. That is and that should be a no tolerance policy in organizations. And if that type of behavior is accepted to where that is unaddressed and that she's not reprimanded for that behavior, and then also too, there has to be a level of psychological safety that needs to be in a workplace. And obviously is not part of it. Psychological safety is a term that was around way before DEI, okay? Because psychological safety is important in the workplace. That means we're not having to go to work and get cussed out or verbally abused or told that we're not always doing a good job when we know we're delivering 100%, things like that. So Beverly says they think they are above reproach, though. I'm jobless because I challenged it. And I am so sorry that, you had to experience that, Beverly. But, if you need support in your job search, or if you need someone to talk to through this with, please send me an email through bcwnetwork.com. I would love to be able to share some resources with you that can support not only your job search, but also maybe even if you need to talk to someone. Here's the thing. I don't want anyone ever to any kind of workplace experience that you've had. I do not want you to try your best not to internalize that and keep that with you, because that's what I call workplace baggage. Where sometimes we'll take those experiences with us into other workplaces, and if we see something that we feel like is just a little bit familiar to the previous experience, we're kind of already in this defense mode, and kind of working through thinking the same thing is going to happen again. So working through that workplace challenge or that workplace trauma or whatever you want to call that is important. And the main thing is to gain the skills. And what I mean by skills is that the tools and the resources you need to learn how to address these things in real time, but also equip yourself in a way strategically that can protect you. And what I mean by protect is being able to, be able to document. I always say documentation is a Black woman's best friend in the workplace, but you need to know what those steps are to advocate for yourself. And then even if you have to talk to an employment law attorney just to get some strategic advice on how to, this is what's going on, and how do I protect myself? That's what they're there for, right? So, or at least educate yourself on what that looks like, and that's a whole other conversation when we're thinking about that. But self advocacy is huge; it's important, and we have to have ways to be able to speak for ourselves. But in order for us to speak up for ourselves, but when we're advocating for ourselves, we have to understand how these individuals think. Because if we don't understand how they think, or we don't understand how the game is played, or how they move, this is where they can one up you, because they're banking on you not knowing how to advocate for yourself. They're banking on you not speaking up. They're banking on being able to push you out. They're banking on being able to say what they want, and that you're not going to address it, or there's going to be not going to be any consequences. And that's so not true. Beverly says, "Thank God for Jesus, girl." Okay, won't He do it? Okay, amen for that. He was there. I'm experiencing that peace that surpasses all understanding. Yes, I will be reaching out to you. I'm struggling with the age thing. Yeah, and here's the thing. I understand that too, for sure. So would love to be able to support you. This is what BCWN is for. And I don't want, just don't internalize that. The whole thing is us being able to have the tools to equip ourselves to be empowered in these workplaces, and not allow for these individuals to think that they can do and say what they want without us you going to challenge that or advocate for ourselves. And when you go against when you challenge something, I do think you challenge it, that's where you have to be the most courageous, when you challenge it. Okay, because what you're doing is standing up for yourself, you are advocating for yourself, and if you're strategically doing it in the right way, it can be very liberating. And then also too, if you know you're working, and sometimes when we're working in toxic workplaces and we know there's a bunch of crap, sometimes we have to know when to throw in the towel too. Okay, because some not all battles are worth fighting. Some of them we do have to kind of cut our losses and go. Tyra says, "I work with professional women to advocate for themselves in a positive way." Absolutely, Tara. I mean, it is important that we do that. Part of, BCWN has been around for a long time. We've been around longer than a lot of these other organizations that are out there. We are the authority in terms of how long we've been around. We've been around since 2012. We were around before DEI was just a hot thing, and we're still going to be here specifically because we know, okay, that regardless of DEI is around or not, Black women still need professional support and growth and development for where they want to go. Becky says they know they were wrong, gave me a severance package to leave because of everything I brought to the company, my first time in 35-year history. Won't he do it? Yes. I just signed an NDA because I just had moved to my new brand new home 2 weeks prior. Okay, I understand that. You made a life decision to not want to move forward with that. But here's a teachable moment from that. I I applaud you for challenging that. So, think about what is it you could have done differently. And that way, if anything comes up again like that, you'll know exactly how to handle it next time. So that's what's so important. That's what's so important, is to making sure, right? And we have a workshop that we do, and it's called oh goodness, I can't get the name out of it out now, around self advocating for yourself in the workplace. So, and then we also have plenty of articles out there about six things to in terms of speak up, when 6 times you need to speak up for yourself in the workplace. So we pride ourselves on being able to advocate for women and giving them the tools and resources they need able to advocate for themselves in the workplace. And plus, we do have some employment law attorneys that are Black women, female Black attorneys that are in our network that are supportive as well. So I think it's great that we think about that specifically and how we strategically go about that. There are times in the workplace where I have spoken up for myself, and I was afraid to do it, and I documented, and I came out on the end where they were like, okay, let's just bat on, because she's got tools, she's got the resources and tools to be able to, and to be able to know how to speak up for yourself and come out on the end and still have your job, right? So I think it's just a matter sometimes about strategy. And a good friend of mine, Marcia Haygood, who's a co-author of um, Little Black Book of Success, The Laws of Leadership for Black Women. She is the co-author of that book, which is amazing, by the way. Her analogy is strategy over emotion. And once we get out of that place of being angry about the experience, now we have to step back and say, okay, what's the strategy going to be to address this? What is the strategy going to be for me? And here's the thing, don't just have a strategy. What's the outcome you're looking for? Right? So you need to also have an outcome from the strategy. So make sure what you're looking for, you also address that as well. We cannot afford to allow for individuals to treat us certain ways in the workplace. I always say you have to pay attention to the people that you work with and how they move. And I know that sounds redundant, and you probably hear me say this all the time in these Career Tip Tuesdays, but it's important that you pay attention to how people move in the workplace because it can change, it can shift. Companies, organizations, priorities change. And when they change, and if you see that shifting leadership changing too, you got to pay attention to that. A clear sign of a toxic workplace is when you have high level leaders who are quitting the organization in droves. That is a clear sign that there is something wrong when you have high level leaders leaving an organization, just one after the next. And it could be a year from now to whatever that looks like. And that is a problem. And then what happens is they're bringing in those high level leaders who don't understand the culture, don't want to understand the culture, want to lead the way they want to and make their mark. That's how the culture gets convoluted, especially if you come from a place where the culture was healthy and it was great, and then now it's changing. So again, thinking about that specifically is important. Oh, Tyra says, absolutely. Hi, RN. She said, that's right. Patricia says, thank you for providing a safe place to discuss this very sensitive topic. Absolutely, Patricia. She says, yes, lead with strategy. Great point. Strategy over emotion. You want to have a good, strong, healthy sense of emotional intelligence to be able to come up with strategy. Because if you're leading from emotion, you're not going to get things done. You're not going to you're leading from a place that's not going to allow you to have the communication you need to communicate with what I consider power and intention, being able to show up with confidence and being assertive and not backing down. Right? You got to be able to, and you may not always win the fight, but the whole point is standing up and speaking up for yourself is the big thing. Okay, calling it out in real time when you need to. That's what's important. Hugely important. So yes, we're here, Patricia, every other Tuesday, 12:30 to 1. A little bit we're going over today, but we're always here providing career tips, highlights. We also have our organization, which is bcwnetwork.com for those of you who are new, first time watching us here. You definitely can be a part of our community. We are kind of revamping our community right now, so it is down because we're not kind of, but we are redesigning our platform. So that's under construction right now for the new design. So again, I hope this was helpful tips for everyone. And Patricia and Beverly would love to connect with you. Tyra would love to connect with you as well. Send me hi, Elise. Didn't even know you were here. Um, and make sure that you connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message. Would love to provide you with some tools, resources, guides, videos, some of those things that we do to when we talk about advocacy in the workplace. I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, Patricia, but I work with women all over the US and abroad as well too. But yeah, HQ right here in Cincinnati for those of you who are watching. All right, so here's the thing. When it comes to thinking about um, the workplace, every workplace has its characters. Don't just survive them. Master how to navigate these personalities is power that moves you to build your emotional intelligence, your political savvy, and your influence. That is hugely important for you to think about. That's my career smart tip for you today. Every workplace has its cast of characters. Don't just survive them. Master how to navigate personalities is a power move that builds your emotional intelligence, political savvy, and your influence. We have to learn how to continue to advocate for ourselves. That is probably one of the most critical things that you can do. And understanding human nature and behavior in the workplace, being able to identify biases. And here's the thing: we always have choices. We're never stuck, and always have power. What we have to recognize is the power that we have. We have to recognize how do we make these decisions from the choices that we do have, and then we also have to learn that speaking up doesn't always have to have consequences because that's how you advocate. And if you are dealing with individuals where there's consequences coming from how you're speaking up, that's not your problem. It's theirs because they don't have the level of emotional intelligence to understand that you are individual like they are, and that you deserve to be treated with dignity, kindness, and respect like any other individual in the workplace. As Black women, We shouldn't have to go to work and be treated a specific way and still trying to do our jobs. But it is our responsibility to get to that place to where we are speaking up for ourselves in a way that empowers us, and not just empower us, but always remember to give back. There's always going to be a black woman behind you who's dealing with the same thing, and she needs to know how you dealt with it too. So just want to share that before we wrap up for the day. All right, you all. Just want to share with you how you can find us. You can go to bcwnetwork.com. And just as a matter of fact, this website here, this link here is you can download our 6 power moves that every black woman should know. It is a guide that we offer for free that you can download. And that way, I think it's a great educational piece too. Let me see if I can actually put this in the LinkedIn space for you all to download it really quickly. See if I can find it and put it in there for you all before we leave for the day. Let's see. I'm working through it here. Ah, there it is. If you all can let me know if you can see this link, that'd be great. You guys will say yes, no, maybe so. There it is. I see it. Yes, Beverly, you're right. Thank you for saying that. So true. Modern day slavery. Girl, it's like, yeah, stop playing these games. We are human individuals, and you need to understand that you are so welcome. So yeah, free. There's a free guide for you. It's called 6 Power Moves Every Black Woman Should Know. I put the link in the chat box, so please take it down, download it, stay in touch with us, connect with us on bcwnetwork.com. Again, we do have a mobile app, but it's actually in the process of being redesigned. So excited for the new redesign launch coming next month. But again, thank you all. I want you all to have amazing rest of your work week, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Bye, everyone.